Hello and welcome to this state school board debate with Republican candidates in District 14. This large district includes all of 9 counties: Beaver, Carbon, Emery, Grand, Iron, Juab, Millard, Sanpete, and Sevier, and part of Utah County. My name is Stan Rasmussen. I'm Government Affairs Vice President with Sutherland Institute, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. We will be talking today with candidates Emily Green and Kim Pickett. I would like to recognize and thank the sponsors of this debate series, member organizations of the Utah Education Debate Coalition. They are the Hinckley Institute of Politics, KSL and the Deseret News, Sutherland Institute, the United Way of Salt Lake, the Utah Association of Charter Schools, and the Utah PTA. Our purpose today is to provide a platform to help delegates make informed decisions as they prepare for the upcoming state convention, and to give voters an opportunity to learn about the candidates for the state board as this important election season continues. The rules of this debate are simple. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds for an opening statement. And then for the first half hour or so, I will pose questions to them that have been developed by the debate coalition. Each candidate will be given up to 90 seconds to respond. Should a rebuttal be necessary, I will allow an extra 30 seconds. As we near completion of our time today, we will be giving each candidate 90 seconds to share a concluding statement. We have a timekeeper that is reminding us of the time and making sure we're on track. At about the half-hour point, I will begin asking questions submitted by you, the viewers. So please be thinking of these as we go along and be posting them to the chat in YouTube. We ask that you present questions that apply and could be responded to by both candidates. And we request that your questions and comments be civil and respectful. Prior to the debate, I met with the candidates to review the rules, and using a random number generator, we decided the order by which we will begin. Kim Pickett will go first, and then we will hear from Emily Green. From that point forward, we will alternate who will respond first to the questions. We will begin now with the 90-second opening statements, and Kim Pickett, we'll begin with you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for letting us have this opportunity to discuss these very important issues dealing with education in our state. Give you a little background about me. I'm from Gunnison, Utah, and we run one time we were a John Deere dealer, but in their wisdom, they decided they didn't want any little mom and pop stores anymore. But we still have an auto parts store and a shop and things of that nature. I grew up working on our dairy farm here in Gunnison, and it gave me a lot of experience about hard work and things of that nature. And that's something my brother and son still have. And I went to BYU, received a degree in agricultural economics, and went on a mission to Brazil, and came back, worked at a brokerage firm after I graduated from the Y up there in the Provo area, and then met my wife because I was lined up by one of my coworkers there, which was a great blessing. We've been blessed with 6 children, and now we have 10 grandchildren. And the thing that's extremely lucky for us is the fact that all my children were able to find jobs here in Gunnison, which is kind of amazing. So I had all my 10 grandchildren here for Easter. And that's just, to me, consider a great blessing. And that's part of my objective and reason for running for state school board. I'm presently on the South Sanpete School Board, and I've served there as president and vice president. I've been on the Utah High School Activities Association. I've been involved in many levels of Republican politics. But again, the driving force is I want an innocence for my grandchildren in their schooling. And I think we're being bombarded by so much stuff that we have to work to give them that innocence back. They deserve that. And I've advocated and testified before the legislature on various issues dealing with education. And we've had a lot of things dealing with the High School Activities Association, dealing with fairness in those type of activities. But I just really, truly appreciate this opportunity to run and for this opportunity to answer some questions today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Emily Green.
Yes, my name is Emily Green, and I'm also very excited to be here and appreciate this opportunity that we have to make this discussion and the coalition that has organized this for us today. A little bit about myself, and first and foremost, I'm running for state school board because I believe in the quality that education can provide to our students and the doors that it opens and the lives that it can present and guide and create for our students. I'm a mother of 5. My oldest is 16, my youngest is 5. So I'm just kind of right in the middle of this I've been very involved from the beginning. And actually, it was my daughter's first grade teacher that really launched me into the schooling involvement scene, because I realized how amazing this woman was and how influential she was in these children's lives. She just carried herself with wonderful composure, and it just inspired me. I also started to begin to realize how important the PTA program was, specifically in our school, and jumped in with both feet and started to serve on, and all the fun that the PTA program provided for us, eventually becoming a PTA president, involved with fundraising. They're kind of headed to very specific fundraisers that raised over $30,000 for just our amazing elementary school. Some more background about my experience: as I graduated from Southern Utah University with a bachelor's in family and consumer science. My minor was in early childhood development. So that's always been something that I've held close, and it's kind of guided me through that experience and involvement with the schooling system. I am currently serving on the board for IHC, and my husband and I are small business owners. We have work with and close to 300 employees. So that's very much a part of our dinner conversation on a daily basis. Great opportunities there, wonderful people. And I've also been invited to, through some organizations, extended the invite to attend the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, Civil Society World Congress of Family. And it's through that lens that I am looking through the education situation that we have, and hope to bring some knowledge and light to that platform. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Emily. I would like to begin with a general overall question about education in Utah. Please tell us your assessment of public education in our state. Are we succeeding? Are our schools succeeding in educating our children as we ought to? Where do we need improvement? And if elected to be a member of the board, how would you help bring about those improvements? And Emily, we'll begin with you on this question.
Okay. Well, I think that there's a lot of amazing things that our schooling system has to offer. And again, being involved in the classroom there, just as a room mom and through the PTA organization, I have seen some incredible things that we have going for us. And I think that we've come a long way in, where we started, but even in the recent years, again, which is why I've decided to get involved on this level, is kind of we're getting a little bit sidetracked, it seems, away from academic integrity. And that's kind of been something that I've been talking to a lot of people about, a lot of delegates, about this concept of maintaining academic integrity and not having it be lost to programs through the process. So I think right now we're experiencing a very pivotal time in how we're approaching our civics education and how we're approaching our academic alignment and how rigorous we are in that field. And what I want to do is build on the strengths that we have right now, realign how we're getting maybe a little bit sidetracked on where we are and what we're doing, and then make sure that our teachers have the ability to maintain the art and heart of their teaching experience. I believe that helps, guides, and it reaches our students on a level that will impact their involvement with their schooling career. So thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
Well, I think we have a great education system here in the state of Utah. We have a lot of great teachers and administrators, and I think we have great parents. And that's one of the important things is we need them involved in education at all times. I think there's always room for improvement no matter what. And those are things that we need to evaluate all the time, because we're being inundated by these influences from the outside that, as Emily stated too, we're not focusing on the basics of just education. And we need to focus on those things and allow our children to prepare that way. A concern I have too is that when our kids, we can say we got a high graduation rate, we're at 85 or 89 or 99%. And we have a high one in our district. But more important is that those individuals are prepared to go out and get a career, okay? Whether they go to college, whether they go to a trade school, but be prepared to move on to that degree. And I think that's something we need to do a better job on. I think the emphasis has been too much in the past, just go get a college degree. I got one, not a problem with that. But I also think that there's a lot of other things that we could be doing to prepare these kids that they can go out and get a job, because that's what needs to be done.
Thank you. Emily?
Yes, do you want me to follow up on?
Is there anything else you'd like to offer?
Well, I think there's been a lot of good points made. One thing that I would like to emphasize is a reality that I think one of the biggest things that I think is influencing what we're seeing is the involvement in programs and technologies, and how data and technology kind of have entered into the school system. I think that's one area of focus that I really want to spend time on, is how that correlates to what the data that we're seeing from our students. Literacy is one of the most important things, and we can get people graduating, but we also really need to understand, do they have the tools that they need? Are they literate? Can they articulate their thought? Can they write it down? And keep maintaining those academic checkpoints.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question has to do with the legislature that completed their annual session last month. They considered many bills, including some that did not pass, that would have addressed curriculum and instructional materials transparency to enable parents more clearly to be aware of what is being taught in their children's classrooms. Can you tell us about your personal philosophy on these issues, and how can curriculum transparency be addressed in ways that strengthen the partnership between parents and teachers? Emily, we'll have you respond first.
Okay, that ties great into what I just was mentioning. There's been, that this new shift towards technology-based learning one-to-one, and there's pros and cons to that for sure. I think, coming through the pandemic, we see that this, one-to-one technology, I think that's been a desire for a lot of people. With this new form of how curriculum is implemented into the schooling system, is also naturally going to require that we understand what that looks like and how we can make sure that we're following and have the ability to track what our students are learning. I feel like that is the biggest hurdle that we are currently dealing with. The adaptive learning changes with how the student interacts with the computer program that they're doing. This makes it a lot harder for parents to understand what their children are actually seeing and viewing. Some of these programs, they can't even go back and read that. So I think we need to have a really robust conversation around those realities. We're in a generation that we've never been, provided the opportunity of technology use, which is going to require legislature to understand how that is going to work within our academic schools and the assignments and how our children are learning. There's responsibilities there and guardrails there that aren't in place, and we need to take the time to understand what those need to be.
Thank you. Kim Pickett?
Well, I think there's a balance here. We want to trust our teachers, and we need to have confidence in them. But at the same token, we want to make sure that the information and the instruction is such that it's appropriate instruction. And so, there's different thoughts. You can have cameras in the classroom, have them submit their plans far in advance so we can review them. And I don't think there's one simple answer for sure and the direct thing, but I think the important thing is, again, is we want teachers involved with the parents of the students. And hopefully parents are going to their parent conference meetings and things of that nature and be involved that way. We also want to make sure that our administrators are monitoring what's going on in the classroom. One thing we have in our South Sanpete School District is we have one-on-one with our iPads. Now, again, technology does not replace what really needs to be there, which is the student and the teacher and the interaction. But it can be something of benefit, and we can use technology to helpfully even the playing field for some, but it does not replace the important things. But one thing about that, we've told parents, if they're concerned with their students in our district, is film what's going on and bring the film to board meeting and let us know, because we don't want to be policed that way. We have to have confidence in those that are teaching. But more important, I think we have to really make sure we review the curriculum and what's being fed to us, because there's some things that kind of maybe get just subtly put in. And so we have to watch that. But again, I think we have to have a trust in those in the education system, both our administrators and teachers.
Thank you. A topic that frequently arises concerns school choice. Last session, the legislature considered the proposed Hope Scholarship, and that did not pass. Some saw it as being similar to the voucher bill that was defeated by voters 15 years ago. What are your thoughts about school choice, specifically students being able to access educational funds to assist them in accessing tutoring or curriculum that is better suited for their individual needs? And Kim, we'll begin with you on this one.
Okay, I've been kind of an odd man out in my district over the years, because way back when it was proposed about 16, 18 years ago, I was actually a supporter of it, and I'm still a supporter of it today. I think that we have to realize that every student may learn differently, and so some of them need that opportunity to choose and go somewhere else. Now, that being said, we have to be a little careful too. I believe in the choice of a charter school, but at the same token, in an urban area, some of those things make more sense than in a rural area. In these small school districts, if we have to divert our funds to some other source, it doesn't leave us much to take care of the students in our district. And so there's a place for these various venues, but we have to be careful that we don't hurt public education by doing this. And I know part of the argument is, well, you know, I pay tax dollars and they should follow the student. And I appreciate that and I get that. But also I have friends that have never had children and they still pay into the public system to educate our kids. So I don't have a problem with parents, if they think it's in the best interest of their children, to be able to have vouchers. But I think it needs to be more as a tax credit than actual payment of a voucher. And then the other question is how do we follow up to make sure that those students in those situations are getting the education they need?
Thank you. Emily?
Yes, this is a great question. And I think kind of where I'm coming from is a couple levels. First is that being a business owner, I believe that competition is a healthy thing. And in a market that demands excellence, it provides constant, evaluation of where you sit in the market. I am a supporter of school choice, and I think that what it does is it opens up that playing field for competition and excellence. If there seems to be, a dissatisfaction in what's being provided, that there can be options for parents to look for avenues that will align with what they want their educational experience to be. With that, I do believe that there is the reality of the funding that takes place on how to manage that and balance that between the two. I would like to create this conversation and collaborate with charter and state schools and find, ways that we can move and develop this together. And I also would like to provide ways that if parents feel inclined to homeschool, that they also have that opportunity. Each student and family is so different, but I do think at the heart of every parent and student and the choices that they make is one that directs them towards academic excellence. And I do think that a healthy environment that provides lots of options for those situations will only benefit the entire system. I know that there's lots of levels to look at that, and I'm anxious to have those conversations.
Thank you. I'd like to turn now to a budgeting question. Every year, the State Board of Education distributes billions, with a B, billions of dollars to schools. Please tell us what qualifies you to take a significant role in making these types of decisions, and what will be your guiding principles for making budgeting decisions. And Emily, we invite you to reply first.
Okay. When I started to realize the magnitude and the big dollar signs that the school board has, towards the state, that's quite a bit. What makes me have some qualifications there is the fact that we are small business owners, and on a very small scale in comparison to that number, I think the approaches and the desired outcome is the same. Any expenditure that you make, you would hope has a positive outcome, and that it has a positive, investment. Education can also be, the intangible outcome, and that is that our students are leaving with the reading scores, the writing abilities, the math, capabilities. So that's the data that we're getting. So to balance that and to fund those, I think it comes down to looking at the data, analyzing what programs we have implemented and how it actually is directing in a business front, like the bottom line. And that bottom line is, what are our percentages? If we are graduating, at 88%, but our kids are only reading at 41%, of the 41%, how many are actually proficient? Those percentages can kind of be staggering. And I think that we need to make sure that every single program, every single department serves a very specific purpose. If that purpose is getting lost in how it's being involved and utilized, then I think that those are the areas that we have to spend some time and really question if they're necessary. If they're not, then that's where you kind of start streamlining and refocusing the funds to where we're getting the best outcomes.
Thank you. Kim Pickett.
Yeah, being a small business owner also, and dealing with the agricultural business, I've gone through, in the years I've been here, I've gone through recession, I've gone through COVID, I've gone through numerous droughts, and these are real issues. Sometimes I don't get paid, and so we have to balance this. I know the importance of a balanced budget. I know the importance of putting funds where they need to be, and sometimes we have the philosophy that, well, if we throw money at it, we'll solve the problem. But a lot of times that's not the answer. It has to make sure that it's put towards something that is of value and that we'll see some results. Part of that is the fact that, as Emily was stating too, with regards to the graduation rate, we can have people graduate, but if they're not competent, what are we really accomplishing? What frustrates me a little bit is we always complain about the federal government saying we're tying strings with this, and the state complains about it. And then our state legislator and our state school board do the same things, instead of letting the local boards make many of those decisions that they know affect them more so than others. In other words, our budget needs in South Sanpete perhaps are very different than those in Jordan. And yet some of the funding is tied into a certain program or whatever that has to be used just a certain way. And I understand part of that logic is to make sure that it's going where it needs to be, but we still need to put some trust in these local leaders. And we have needs in our rural area more so than some of the urban areas. So in directing that budget, I think more of it needs to be put in the WPU that allows the individual districts to address those issues that they feel are important in either the infrastructure of their schools or in the teaching, especially in the classrooms.
Good. Thank you. Utah continually faces a shortage of teachers. What should the State Board of Education do to increase the pool of competent, qualified teachers from which districts and charter schools can fill the needs? And related, in your view, what can be done to improve retention, to encourage teachers to remain in the teaching profession? Kim, I invite you to respond first.
Okay. I actually think we need to rethink the whole concept of how we go about certifying teachers, okay? Because sometimes somebody will go and get a degree and then they'll go to teach and they'll find out, I really don't enjoy that much. Or they may go in there and say, I didn't buy into this. I didn't realize that I had to be the babysitter and I had to teach all the moral values of everything, and I had to teach the immoral values of some things, is what they're trying to do, and putting all this stuff upon these poor teachers that they have to deal with. So that's part of the reason for the burnout. But I think that's the way we have to address this, and I like the different pathways that they're allowing some people to come into teaching with, is sometimes it's good to go out and study and learn something that you're really interested in, take some of the courses in teaching. And I mean, I think it would be ideal if most people could go out in a different career and then come back into the teaching profession. I realize that isn't the case and can't happen that way, but we need to facilitate that ability for some of these very qualified people that now want to teach in their life to be able to get back in and become teachers and not make that so difficult. And we also need to make sure that we don't put so much added testing and other requirements on these teachers that make it where I don't want to stay in here. I don't want to do this anymore because it's just not worth the value, and let them really concentrate on what's important. Some people just have a natural ability to be a great teacher, and those are the ones we want and want to support them.
Thank you. Emily?
Okay, this one is very important because I think it is a reality. Just even locally, to see how many teachers have maybe even retired early, teachers that have exited the field. And if I were to say, like, if I could try to isolate maybe where that starts to stem from, I do believe that part of it is the lost ability for a teacher to teach with their heart and bring in their art of their field. And well, where does that come from? Part of that comes from this large amount of red tape that's kind of put on teachers in the sense that they are becoming, I believe in some senses, more compliance officers to programs that are coming through the school, and which requires a lot of reporting that they have to do. And I mean, I was speaking with one teacher that said in order for her to complete a week's worth of teaching with all of the paperwork and requirements that she is obligated to do for her job now, that she would need about a week and a half's time to complete all of that. I think that is something that we really need to start listening to, especially with the teachers that are in the classroom environment. They're feeling the effects of all of these different levels that even come from the admin down. And I know that there's, many, many reasons certain things are implemented, and it's good to have good management within within our schools. But I think that that's a conversation that needs a little bit more time, and those teachers need a little bit more voice too. So as far as retention, I think it also comes down to the fact that if a teacher enters their field, they're allowed to teach with their heart and the art of what they've studied, they'll want to stay. And obviously, we need to make sure that those funds and they're getting paid what they should be. That can increase with, again, addressing programs.
Thank you. As we're getting close to the half-hour mark, I'll ask one more question, and then we'll begin addressing questions from our viewers and listeners. We've already received some and invite you, our listeners, to submit additional questions by posting them via the YouTube chat function. Here's a question I think will be interesting to our listeners. Many teachers express frustration about their limited ability to discipline students for fear of lawsuits or even parental aggressions. How do we increase the level of student discipline in our schools? I think we'll begin with you, Emily.
Okay, so this is an area that I'm actually very passionate about, and have been kind of involved on some different levels to see that there has been a shift away from, let's say, the traditional word of discipline. And so there are different ways that we can have it, create environments where a student can come and show up and learn. I think that this is an area that needs some conversation. So there's been a direct shift from one of character education into one that's more social emotional learning. This is a very big subject that I think is gaining momentum, and as it should, because I believe that those two things have very different outcomes. I think if we realigned more towards character education, I think that children thrive with expectations. And I think that bringing back the ability of the teacher to have their classroom autonomy and have expectations, and they can bring in those maybe discipline, systems that they know works with their children. That's another level of red tape that can kind of be taken away from teachers and deserves conversation. I think that there's also this kind of an outside reality that parents face, that we don't know how to do these things. I think that there's a little and we're seeing this, an involvement that's taking place and being reinvigorated in parents, that we are the caretakers of our children. It is our responsibility to teach them how to act, their moral values, how they interact in their societies. So if we could just kind of, clasp hands here together with parents, taking those responsibilities, and then allowing teachers to also create environments within their own classrooms to discipline and maintain the classroom structure that they desire, I think it's a win-win situation. There's a little bit of, diversion away from that, but I think we can realign that to, we know what works.
Thank you. Kim Pickett.
Yeah, one of the main things we need to make sure is that we're giving the support to the teachers from the administration when there is an issue. And we also need to, again, as it's been stated, parents are going to be the number one factor in whether their children are going to behave or not in a school. And we've lost some of that, well, I'm responsible for something and there's no consequences anymore. And that's just a societal thing that needs to be addressed on so many levels, because it's not allowing the teachers, they're always in the wrong. When I was a kid growing up, guess what? I was in the wrong most of the time. I was on the quiet chair in kindergarten, not because I was doing what I was supposed to do, okay, but because I wasn't. And I dealt with that. Luckily, you know, I never had any teachers hit me or anything, but we've got to allow them that opportunity. And what bothered me a little bit is on like sloughing, the legislature passed it to where there's really no consequence if kids slough school. And I'm sitting there going, why did we do that? There needs to be consequences for our actions. And we need to support our teachers and we need to protect them. But us as parents have a great responsibility in finding out what really is going on and then teaching our children that level of respect that they need to have. And again, we need to do, I guess, some training of some sort to help certain teachers. I know in one of our schools that one of the teacher would struggle with disciplining, and so the students didn't respect him at all. And our principal worked with him, and towards the end, he became one of the best teachers and was able to handle those children through just some training. And so more training for these teachers.
Very good, thank you. We've now reached the halfway point, and we'll begin relaying questions from our viewing and listening audience. As your questions are being relayed to me via text, I'll read them. Our first questioner asks, what specific policies, rule, or resolution has the board passed in the last year that you support? I think on this one, we'll begin with Kim.
Well, the policy and resolution, I mean, and they didn't pass it. They decided to pass on the dealing with what the legislature gave them about some of this training with sexuality and gender and things of that nature. And they decided they'd punt on that one and pass it down to the local districts. Now, I agree that local districts should have control of that and understand that, but I also think that there needs to be some direction at least given to these districts, because we on a local level, and that's what I'll say every time, let the local ones do it, but give them the resources to make those decisions and deal with those things. And so again, less red tape that they can give us, the better off we are.
Thank you. Emily?
Okay, one area that I think that we probably need to spend more time on is about actually the bill in regards to critical race theory. I do feel that one was passed, but I feel like there was actually different avenues that was not addressed in that bill. So I would hope that there's actually some more time there, because there's lots of different levels of maybe critical theory that is one of the most important things, conversations that we're having as a nation. If I were to be able to go back and readdress that, it probably would be that one, because I think there needs to be a clear understanding of what that looks like and how it manifests through curriculum, through teacher guidelines, through the programs that we're using, how those interact with each other. That probably is one of the main ones that I would hope. I do agree with. I was okay about the transgender, regulations that they were discussing, only because I do think that that's a topic that should work on closer with our board levels. I know that our board was very proactive in being involved during that process. I was very proud of them for, taking and spending the energy and time trying to understand it at a deeper level. And these really are the issues that are facing our time and our day, and deserve lots of conversations that we can even continue to develop and go back to and refine and, kind of streamline those together.
Thank you.
Could I reply to that too?
Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
The critical race thing is so important. It should not be taught in schools. What concerns me a little bit, though, is our legislature passed SB 244, an ethnic studies bill, and they gave that responsibility now to the state school board to interpret and see how to implement that. And I have a concern there to make sure it doesn't get hijacked and pushed back into a critical race type thing. And we have to be vigilant to make sure those things are taken care of. It's good to look at, ethics and this ethics studies bill and stuff like that, but we still have to make sure we focus on what really matters and not, again, get that just diverted a different way.
Thank you. Our next viewer question is somewhat related to what we've been sharing. Aside from hot button talking points, SEL, social emotional learning, CRT, critical race theory, book banning, issues related to LGBTQ+ students, What does your day-to-day governance of and advocacy for public education look like? And I think, Kim, we begin with you on this one.
Well, one thing we need to work at is equality in funding, okay? Especially in these rural districts, we just don't have the resources sometimes because most of our property taxes are owned by the federal government. And so we can't generate that much from property taxes, and yet we have one of the highest burdens on our patrons here on what they have to pay for property tax to generate this income. And so we have, we don't have the artificial turf fields and we don't have things of that nature because we have to get by with what we have to. We have an issue that we have to deal with busing. We have to bus a lot more kids in a rural area than in a more urban area. And yet sometimes they were supposed to fund that at 100%. They never have. And so it's been tough that we don't allow equity and equality in funding throughout the state. And I think that the kids in South Sanpete and in Grand and Emory and Juab and all these other ones deserve the same quality of education as anyone in some of the bigger, more affluent districts. And that's something we need to look at. And we need to actually really look at how are we able to get some of this federal ground back, because the payment in lieu of don't even come close to taking care of that.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate a lot of what Kim just said as well, because that's actually, as I've called and spoke with delegates, that's something that I keep hearing as well. And, and we find ourselves in a unique position because we're right central, central Utah, from the west side to the east side, top to bottom. And that's kind of where a lot of these rural areas are, with very specific trades. And so, which ties into one of my other, I guess, passions is trade schools. I think I think we're starting to see, a shifting trend of the need of the trade schools. I know that in some of them, they've tried to launch some trade programs that offer the ability and the training certificates and licenses that these students can launch themselves into careers that are very applicable to where the demographics of where they live, and kind of that idea that they can stay in the small town that they grew up, contribute back to their societies because they were provided an opportunity for those resources. I think it's something that was, has kind of been neglected here for a little while. I think that, higher education is absolutely important. And again, I think it comes back to a competitive stage where we offer the options that are open the doors to tailor to the individuals and their desires of what they want to do with their lives. So trade schools would be another conversation that I would love to get going. And I also say that with a little bit of passion because I feel like Iron County has offered a wonderful trade tech school. And to see the excitement that's coming from the students as they're entering, their last few years of their high school experience is so motivating to me. And the teachers that are in those fields that are teaching their passion and offering that passion to these students and that ability is really empowering to me. So that's one that I'm very interested in.
Thank you. Here's an interesting question. As a state school board member, how would you separate your personal opinions from your role as a member of the body, especially when they are in opposition? I think we'll start with you, Emily.
Okay, I'm sorry, will you repeat the question, please?
Sure. As a state school board member, how would you separate your personal opinions from your role as a member of the body, especially when those two may be in opposition?
Okay, that's a great question and very much a reality of taking a position like this. I think the greatest way to do this is that you acquire information and you have the ability to speak with the people directly involved with whatever it is that's on the table. I think that taking the time to listen, to understand, and to ask a lot of questions is very important to coming to a sound decision. I think one of the highlights of our great nation is that we value public debate in the public square. And I think that's something that should continue to be fostered in a healthy way. It's the best outcome that we can give to, sorry about that. That is what, corrects and brings the best outcome to that.
Thank you. Kim.
With regards to that, yeah, the thing about it is you have to remember on being part of a board, you're only one member, and the board is what actually makes the decisions and moves ahead with things. And so you have to be careful that you don't burn all those bridges with those other people you need to work with some of your personal thoughts and personal opinions. Once a decision is made, you need to be supportive of it. But if it's something that you don't agree with, you need to go through the right channels and work to have that maybe brought up again. And hopefully, even as Emily said too, educate people. People need to be educated on different things to realize where you're coming from. You shouldn't, I think, just silence somebody's opinion. But at the same token, we shouldn't be undermining the board in every opportunity that we have, but we have to develop a good reason why these people would be, in one sense, converted to what our thoughts are of these things. But I also think that we need to not be so quick to judge others because they need their opportunity to express themselves too and value each one's opinion. I was on a board that one of the fellows was, quite a bit liberally more than I am, and yet we were able to accomplish great things together because we respected each other. And I realized that some of his ideas were really good ideas, and he the same with me. So that's something that you have to realize. You don't want to undermine the workings of the board.
Thank you. Another viewer question. What are your thoughts about companies that provide curriculum and data software to our schools that push different values and beliefs than the majority of Utah parents, in the view of the listener or viewer? An example may be use of pronouns or belief in systemic racism. I think we'll start with you, Ken.
Totally against that. Totally, we should not be supporting that. And I'll bring up the example too, and it hurts me to say this, but I canceled my subscription with Disney. Okay. Plus, I'm just sorry. There's so much good stuff out there, and that's what bothers me. There's so much good stuff, but we want to kind of throw in a little bit of this other stuff. And if it doesn't reflect our values, why should we be promoting that? In fact, if anything, we need to be setting the standard for the nation. We need to be developing curriculum here in Utah that sets the standards that other places want to come in and say, we want that because we believe in those same values. And so the short answer is no, we should not be involved and use that type of curriculum.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, I really think that this kind of ties back to what I was mentioning earlier about how technology has changed the landscape of the learning environment. So when you have tech companies, we are just currently involved with creating programs and ways to interact and get that, learning experience to students, that we are again have to be and required to be involved with how that will be utilized and implemented in our schools. A lot of that comes down to how data is gathered. A lot of it comes down to the adaptive learning and the inability to track and continue to monitor exactly what it is our students are learning. And so those are the things that we need to look at when it comes down to adopting that curriculum, those programs within our schools. I think that what we are currently developing are the correct questions to ask when we're assessing what we are choosing to make contracts with and purchasing and implementing within the walls of our schools. We haven't really known the capabilities of what technology can do and its involvement. And those are the questions that we are becoming very, very aware of. So this is something that is just gaining momentum. And I think it can gain momentum in all the right directions, because what we have seen in the last year is the fact that parents are still very much desire to be involved with what is being taught to their kids, how it's being taught, and they want to be able to be involved in that process. That doesn't mean approving a technology program and then realizing that 6 months later your children have been learning things that you didn't agree with, and that quite frankly sometimes have nothing to do with the subject at hand. So very, very important subject.
Thank you. This next question has many touch points with what we've already addressed on these matters, but I'll read it. There's a lot of talk about CRT, critical race theory, in the schools. How would you approach this topic and help LEAs protect against divisive theories? Anything further that you may want to share on that topic? And I think it would be you, Emily, to go first.
Okay. The greatest way that I think that we can deal with the critical race theory is really going back to what I would, summarize as the classical education and the belief in the American ideal, a belief in American exceptionalism, and starting to use the language of our Constitution and our republic here. if you look at 53G 10204, I mean, this is one of, I've got it printed out here. It's one of my favorite documents that is in our Utah code. And it talks about civic and character education are the fundamental elements of the public education system. And it goes on for another 2 pages about the ideals of what people are in essence, and honesty, integrity, morality, civility, duty, honor, service, obedience to law, respect for parents, home and family, and the list goes on. I think it's as simple as really aligning back to what we have in Utah code as it stands around civic and character education, the definitions, the legislative finding, the elements, and that document in and of itself is what we're back curriculum up to that, because we'll see very, very quickly that the focus on critical race theory and critical theories actually align with a completely different form of government. And so then it comes down to maybe the concept of the law of attraction. What is it that we're focusing on? And I believe with everything in me that it should be civic and character education. I would also hope that we can reassess our social studies curriculum standards, and we start at the standards. I feel like that can be developed a lot more. I was involved on the committee for that, the review committee, I should say, and I think it deserves a lot more work, and we have some opportunities there.
Thank you. Kim?
Well, yeah, I mean, the straight answer here is I don't think critical race theory should be taught in the schools. I think and it's been proven too that it's been going around for quite a number of years. And what it wants to do is to pit groups against each other, which and also present a message and a story that just is not correct. This nation is a great nation. It was founded upon great principles and things of this nature. And again, it should not be a viable thing that's being taught in our schools the way it is, because it's really it's to be honest with you, it's a way to undermine everything that's great about this country.
Thank you. Another listener question. How will you advocate for increasing trust in educators? Kim, we'll begin with you.
How will I advocate for increasing trust in educators? Well, I guess part of that again is a transparency issue, that we need to be as transparent as we can on certain issues. But so you're saying increasing trust of the parents and the educators? Is that what
I think that may be the thought behind the listener question.
Right. And so there needs to be the transparency there, that the people feel like they can come in and they can get answers they need. I mean, it's just like the parents should be able to feel comfortable coming to school board meetings and talking to board members. And we shouldn't be considering them domestic terrorists, as the National School Boards Association, colluding with the Biden administration, came out with those decisions that these parents visiting school board meetings are domestic terrorists. And I was quite upset about that, and got on the phone and called many people at the NSBA, because we need that input and we need them to feel like they can come in and present their ideas. Now, there needs to be order and there needs to be decorum. But I think on a lot of that is, and then present to them the information. A lot of times, sometimes it's just a lack of information. We had been sometimes accused of doing things in our schools, and then we'd ask them specifically what they were. And they said, well, that's happening in Pennsylvania, so maybe it's happening here. And again, it was part of it was educating them and not hiding anything. Let people know, because that's the only way you're going to gain trust is allowing people to really see what you're doing.
Thank you. Emily?
Okay, there's a few points that I'd like to make around this one specifically. It's a great question. I think that as far as like the approach or the experience from teachers is cut back the mandated state professional learning trainings. We need to simplify the process and reporting so administrators can help the teachers. And I think there's a lot of that's going on. Again, it kind of goes back to that teacher's experience where she's, within a 1 week's time of course, discussion and teaching, she needs like a week and a half to accomplish those realities. And so I think there's a lot of that's going on that's really driving a lot of division between how kids are and teachers are maneuvering through that. So The other thing that I've talked about as I've kind of campaigned is this concept of programs that are creating the divide between students and teachers. And those programs that are coming in that just, make you feel or make you encourage critical race theory, revoke the moral training of parents, create division through comprehensive sexuality education. There is a battle between parents and teachers. And I find that devastating because teachers have always held the prestige of being one of the greatest influencers of our children's lives. So there's a lot of trust that's been lost in the last year for that. I'm heartbroken by that. And I do think that we need to understand why. I believe it's a lot of programs that are being pushed. So those are the programs that need to be addressed. And that kind of ties back with the assessments and the professional training. If teachers are required to teach these things and have to report it back, and it's against their moral compass to do so, that's a problem. We can start there as well.
Thank you. Another listener question, viewer question. What should be the goals of testing, and is the state accomplishing them adequately? So a question about testing. And I think we'll begin with you, Emily.
Okay. Testing is a very important part of our children's experience. And from testing, you can acquire the data that you need for the checkpoints of where you're at in that process. I do fear this. I've heard, complaints that the testing, end of level keeps changing, which means that the goalpost of what teachers are supposed to be accomplishing is also constantly changing. That disrupts the flow and their ability to really fortify their classrooms and their teaching curriculum. So I think we need to address how that testing requirement is affecting teachers and their ability and scope of what they're testing. We hear the concept of dumbing down of the generations, because all we're doing is keeping it very isolated to a specific test. So I think that deserves some conversation of what that testing is or is not accomplishing, and what we can do about that. I feel like, again, going back to allowing people, teachers, the autonomy to teach in depth with their focus and their ability will only increase what our students are learning. I also get very concerned with the testing as far as even survey type questions. I would love if there was more, questions about, instead of the assessments on personal belief systems or morals or, behavioral type things, we asked questions. How do you feel confident in these specific academic arenas? And then take that data to utilize and fortify the curriculum and those tools that teachers could acquire to help address and help those students succeed at a higher level.
Thank you. Kim?
Well, bottom line is there's too much testing. There's just too much testing out there. And I know a lot of our teachers get so anxious about this because they're so concerned on how it's going to reflect upon them from the results of some of these tests. And to a degree, they don't have control on some of these because there's different classes that come in with a different makeup of students that, in other words, if they didn't have that teacher, they would even be at a lower degree. But because they have that teacher, they're at, say, this degree, and yet it's not high enough to reflect what really is taking place. And again, some of these things are really not relevant to what we're trying to teach. We need to do our testing dealing with the fact, do the kids know how to read? Do the kids understand math and things of that nature? And too many times, we've created an environment that teachers have to teach to the test, which I think is totally wrong. But they have this pressure that if they don't perform with these test results, then somehow they're not doing their job and their job may be at jeopardy. And to be honest with you, I think some of the older generations, we turned out okay. I'm not saying we don't have our issues, but we turned out okay. And we didn't go through all this testing all the time. A good teacher and a good administrator and a good school board knows if these things are being done. Now we need a form of evaluation. I'm not against that, but not to the degree of some of the things that have been pushed down on us.
Thank you. A couple of our listeners have posed a question. What do you think of the State Board of Education's portrait of a graduate? I think, Kim, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I think a portrait of a graduate should be that, number one, that they're able to read, and write and do basic arithmetic, that they have those skills, that they have the skills to go out into society and function as a productive citizen in society. I think that we need to allow them the opportunity in training that they can get a good career. And again, as we've all stated this, and that's not just a college degree, there's so many other careers out there at trade schools, and that we need to also develop programs for them. For example, we have a CTE program, the Career Technical Education Program, that allows a lot of these students, by the time they graduate, to have some certificates in different pathways dealing with agriculture, dealing with plumbing, dealing with these different things. And I think those are the things. So we want somebody that's well-versed, that understands how to react in society, that's willing to take responsibility for their actions in life. Because that's one of the worst things we have, is we're not taking responsibility for our own actions and realizing that we can make a difference and we can do something, but they have the basic abilities to do those things and be a good citizen in our society.
Thank you. Emily Green?
Yes, so, different levels on Portrait of a Graduate. I think it's always, motivational to know where a student stands and their strengths and capabilities and abilities that they can take with them from their educational experience. I think that we want kids to be civically engaged. We want them to be hardworking. We want them to be morally sound. So what happens is, if we can run into problems when we try to micromanage it. So I don't want us to start to implement a program that opens up a brand new avenue of micromanaging, which requires, again, a next level of what programs are implemented or what new departments have to be funded, and take away from that bottom line that actually reaches the teachers in their classrooms. So I know that, again, this also ties back into the reality of technologies. We need to make sure that the data that we're collecting, the things that we're analyzing around our students, and how that is incorporated into the Portrait of a Graduate is responsible and ethical, and it's used responsibly for the benefit of the student in its ideal, and that it's not to bring in other things that can eventually micromanage and go into areas that probably they shouldn't be allowed to go into.
Thank you. We will now take time for closing remarks, a 90-second statement from each candidate. Going in reverse order from how we began, we'll hear first from Emily Green. Emily?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to, again, thank you for this opportunity to do this. It's been quite the learning experience for me to reach out to as many people as I've been able to, and people that have come to me with their concerns. I do hear those concerns. I write them down. I take them very, very seriously. I have, just the experience of what I am experiencing with my children, what I'm seeing on an international stage and a national stage, all the way down to the local stage. There's nothing I believe in more than a quality education, pure academics, the ability of being literate, and what that does to change a person's life in the course of the opportunities that will open up for them. And so my ideals is that we realign and again, establish the art and heart of teaching, that we establish the ideal of academic rigor, academic integrity, opening up those classroom doors back to the teachers so that they can stay focused on their students, and bringing in all the fun, engaging activities that a classical education was able to do. I want there to be a balance between the use of technology and students. And again, if you take the time to listen what our students are saying, you teachers, you are loved by the children, and they want to see you in front of that classroom. So I just encourage just that return to classical education. I am for parental rights, that I believe that parents are the most impactful and powerful person in a child's life, and that they should always be engaged with their educational process, their moral process and development, and the experience that they have throughout the course of their life. So those are the ideals that I will take with me and aspire to. And I again, thank you for your time. I hope to earn your vote, and thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Kim Pickett.
Yes, first of all, thanks again for this opportunity, and thanks to Emily. Extremely impressed with her. And again, I agree with the fact too that parents are the most important factor of success in children's lives in school and in life in general. And that's something that we have to respect and understand. But we also need to realize too that some of these children don't have that same opportunity with parents in the home. And so we have to do what we can to help support them. I appreciate the fact that I've been able to work on our local school board and in these other venues that have prepared me, that I can go in, having met with legislators and dealing with them, that I can deal with actually getting some of these things done. You know, it's really easy for us to make promises, but it's actually making good on those promises and making something happen. I got a little thought here that I just want to read from the Andy Griffith Show, because I kind of like those, which kind of emphasize what I believe. When a hobo told Andy he should just let Opie decide for himself how he wanted to live, Andy had these words of Mayberry wisdom. No, I'm afraid it don't work that way. You can't let a youngin' decide for himself. He'll grab the first flashy thing with shiny ribbons on it. Then when he finds out there's a hook in it, it's too late. Wrong ideas come packaged with so much glitter, and it's hard to convince them that other things might be better in the long run. All a parent can do is say, wait and trust me, and try to keep temptation away. And I think those are things that we need to do, because our children are our future. And thank you.
Thank you. We express our appreciation to Kim Pickett and Emily Green for taking time to participate today. And again, I want to thank our sponsors for providing this forum. We hope you have found this discussion enlightening and that it will help inform your decisions.